unfortunately, a lot of experience with this. I don't even want to think about it.
Good morning. Today is the 27th day of Second Adar, the 17th day of Second Adar, the 27th of March. We're in Machatzit HaShekel, and we're going to try to finish this part quickly. He's discussing this thing that there are two aspects to the scales. The one is putting the 10 gera, the 10-gram stone, which symbolizes wisdom, on the scales. And he said that symbolizes the Or Ein Sof that comes down. That symbolizes the revelation of the infinite that comes down. The other aspect, what's happening on the other pan, is how much of the, let's call it the weight of the world, you can lift with that stone. So you have to put things on the other side, on the other pan, the left side. Why is he doing all this? So going back, this has to do with the two stages, or the two types of birur, clarification, or purification that happens in the world. We said there's a first stage in which a person, we called it, let's say, eats and partakes from the physical world. That's called birur ban. It's called the feminine type of clarification. And then from above comes a light that then takes the good part out, or you could say it alternately, that the waste is cast out. So they're separated, and this separation happens as a second stage. And he said that there's many examples of this in the Torah. The most famous example that the Alter Rebbe quotes all the time is Joseph and his brothers. His brothers were the ones doing the ban biru. They were doing things by engaging in the physical world. They were shepherds, and whatever they did that was physical. And Joseph is like a thinker. He's like outside of this whole system. He's not a shepherd like them. He's sitting and learning with his father. And what is that? So he says that's how the world works. There are people engaged in the physical building of the world, and they work physically. Their bodies, it's even in their bodies. It's a lot of times. There's another example that the Maharash gives, the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe. He gives an example of Jews living in foreign countries. He says that the language that's talked in the country is the first birur, because that's where all the business and everything else is done. And then there's Jews living there who then use whatever is available in that country, meaning that there's an economy, and there's housing, and there's this and that. And they use it in order to learn Torah. And that's the second birur. So the second birur is always much, much higher than the first one. It's just how the world works. It's like saying that you can't really fix something without two stages of fixing it. There's the first stage, which is engaging with that reality directly, and then there's the second stage, which has to clarify what you brought out. So these are called the first and second birur. And he's been saying this about the Machatzit HaShekel, and this chapter is mostly about that. So he gave us the example of the child, the fetus being formed. And he said that the two stages of birur are being done by the ovum, by the woman's womb, but then the seed from the male does the second type of birur. Which one is more important? We'll see hopefully today. Maybe not. And then he sidetracked into the whole question of these levushim, the tzelim, the image of God, as it were, in the person. And it's not exactly an image of God; it's just called tzelim. So it's like a sidetrack here of trying to explain what this means. But what he wants to get out of it is that you need intermediates in order to connect the soul with the body. So why did he even get into this? Because he said that these tzlamim, or tzlalim as they're called in Job, these shadows, or these intermediate spaces, they're made by the waste of what was in the feminine and what was in the ovum. It's the waste that comes from it. Let's see it again. It's the line that starts Chelek Hatov Shebaman. So Chelek Hatov Shebaman Miyano Pnimiyut Neshama U'Malach. The good part of the ovum that leads, again here we're talking theoretically about the fetus himself, which is like a physical thing, but he's using it to also describe something spiritual. The inner part of the soul or the angel that's being formed is taken from the good part of the man, of the Maim Nukvin, of the feminine awakening. V'apsolet shebaman, and the waste nasa menu b'chinat ha'or hanikra shilya. And physically, what we get from the waste is the, what do we call it, the sac, the embryonic sac. And this embryonic sac is like the physical counterpart. V'uinyan halevushim shel hanshama anikraim tzelem. It's like these garments of the soul that are called tzelem. Kanizkar b'zor binyan hatzlalim, as it says in the Zohar about this thing called the shadows. It's a verse in Job. Uviur hadavar hu she'oto halevush hu kuach ruchani hanamuch mikol madrigot hanefesh. And what is this? Because it's made out of waste, it's not really waste. Nothing's ever thrown out. So it's always used in some way. So it's a spiritual power which is lesser than all the levels of the psyche, of the nefesh. Ke'erech levush gashmi laguf. And it's like the sack, it's like a garment that the body wears, but it's not entirely physical. Lechach biyicholto lered u'litchaber v'litlabesh b'nefesh ha'behemit u'vaguf. And so what it gives the soul is this lower garment that it like puts on the physical, and then it can mediate, this garment mediates so that the soul can connect to the body. And this includes all the levels of the soul. What he's saying, even the nefesh bahamis. Even the nefesh bahamis needs a garment like this for the soul to be able to connect to it. So the whole connection between the soul and the body requires this external garment, which again is made out of the waste. And this is a tremendous metaphor. You have to think about, what does this mean? That from the awakening of the physical, from the feminine, from that, its waste are the intermediates that are needed for something so high as connecting the soul into the body. So the first lesson is there's nothing wasted. That even this waste is needed in some way. And that's the source, that's the meaning in Kabbalah of the verse in Psalms 39. A person will walk only with his tzelem, meaning you can't have a person who's alive and constructive and doing things if this tzelem is missing. It has to be there. Now, in later Kabbalah, after the Arizal, this verse, and a very similar verse to it, Kol tzameh lechu lemayim, from this the Rashash, the second reincarnation of the Arizal, so he said that Kol tzameh, or it's the same letters here, look at the words Ach B'Tzelem. So without the Bet, B'Tzelem, Ach Tzelem has the same letters as Kol tzameh. And these are 5 levels of intermediates. The Rashash builds a whole part of Kabbalah that the Arizal only started talking about, and he calls it Kol tzameh because these are 5 levels called Kelim, Levushim, Tzlamim, Mochin, Orot. And there are 5 levels of intermediates that are needed in order for the soul to connect with the body. Where is this good? What do we use it? In Chasidus it's almost never discussed. This is as much as it's discussed. Not because they didn't know the Rashash, but I don't know why. They didn't get into this story of intermediates. And I referred you yesterday to the Maimarim in Ba'aloscha. Sorry, not in Ba'aloscha, B'chukosai. In Likutei Torah, where he discusses these tzlamim. In general, they're just called tzlamim. They're just called tzelems. I don't know what this is. Stumped me. This is a acronym that doesn't make any sense the way I know it. Afilu de'asiyah ve'olamot ha'tachtonim, in the lower worlds, yesh bo pnimiyut v'chitzoniyut kmo re'uta delibam nekuda pnimit רותא דליביה בנקודה פנימית, הוא תמצית של הנפש אלוקית מפנימיות המן דנוקווה דאצילות שנברא על ידי עמד כנ"ל. He says everything, one of the biggest part of Eitz Chaim, the biggest gate in Eitz Chaim, and this was the biggest chiddush of the Arizal. In the end, this was the biggest chiddush. Everything else is like is a local chiddush. There's this general thing that the Arizal gave that nobody was talking about before him, which is called pnimiut and chitzoniut. That everything has an inner aspect and an external aspect. You'll never find that in Shas, you'll never find that in the Rambam, you'll never find it anywhere before him, as far as I know. This was never discussed, that there's an internal aspect and an external aspect to everything. And so think about why did 300 years ago people not know about psychology? They couldn't know because there was no language to describe that I have an inner world that is different from my external world. You look at the Rambam, his psychology is in Hilchos Deos, laws of, I guess, psychology, in Sefer HaMadah. And what does he say there? His whole psychology is behavioristic. He has no discussion of internal states. There's no such thing in the Rambam. He doesn't have internal states, and he was a genius in psychology. He did everything with just one dimension. It's only what you see on the outside. What you see is what you get. There's nothing else. And the Arizal, because this is the truth is that there is an inner dimension, just wasn't discussed. They weren't aware of it, or they weren't discussing it. Even when you look at Proverbs, which is probably the most advanced psychology there was in the ancient world. So everything is behavioristic. Everything he judges by how the person behaves. He never has a description of an inner state. This is how the person is on the inside. So this was a very big chiddush, and it changed everything. So he says now, we have from the Arizal that everything has an inner and outer aspect. Everything. There's nothing in the world. Even this thing has an inner and outer. So the inner and outer here, it says like, why are you saying it's inner and outer? Maybe it's just folded. Maybe it's all external. It's just, I put part of the external inside. It's really external. No. The inside is something else. It's not the space inside.
Yeah.
It's something entirely different. All the more so when you're talking about something spiritual, like a human being. Okay. And so, I wanted to finish this, but obviously we're not going to. So, what he's going to do now is, we just read straight through it. He's going to give us a long, exhaustive description of what we already said, how the physical and the spiritual here, meaning the ovum and the seed, how they reflect two sides of this clarification process, these two stages that we talked about. The first stage coming from the feminine, second stage coming from the masculine. He already said it entirely in the beginning when he gave us the example of the fetus, but then he just adds the language because he's a very good teacher. So he now goes over all the sources in Kabbalah where we got this from. It comes from HaShekel, and he just basically spends the next page and a half just going over all of this more and more. So I don't know. We maybe we should skip it because it's just hard to translate it. It's a lot of terminology. And like I read it again, I didn't see something that was so revealing. He's just explaining this whole model in great depth. But then there's a period here somewhere. Here it is. I think it's from here where we are now. It's a one page. So maybe tomorrow we'll just skip it because really it's just a repetition in all kinds of different directions. Obviously they're all important, and it's important to understand where it all came from. But I think that for us it's already tiresome. It's so maybe tomorrow we'll just start from these 2 points on 134, and then he again he's going to use this. He's going to say it all the time, but we know the basics. There's not very much to add to it. Okay, let's see tomorrow then.